Well, good afternoon, everybody, on this wet and windy July day. And welcome to the Education Skills Service Transformation Committee, 26th of July 2023. So we will kick off with item number 1, apologies for absence. I've got one on my list, and that's Councillor Mike White. Do we have any others, Sam?
No other apologies, Chair.
No others? No. So we've move on to agenda item number 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Do we have any? No, none from the councillors. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, the minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask you for your authority to approve and sign the minutes, going through them page by page? Page 1, page 2, and page 3. Are we content for me to sign them as a correct record?
Yes, I'll move that.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. So we're moving on then to agenda item number 4. Before we get into the detail of right schools in the right places and the report which has been distributed in advance, there's 2 points that I'd like to raise. Last week, Cabinet approved the CDC report, Leadership, Inclusion and Governance, Building Excellence in Swansea Schools. And thanks to Councillor Robert Smith as a Cabinet member for inviting me to the meeting to introduce that report, where we have clear policies based on the committee's work last year, new head teacher and senior leader handbook, new Swansea attendance policy, which is part of the inclusion strategy, and the governing body support strategy and school governance development action plan. So that is great to see, really. The outcome was very positive from the committee last time, I think. In addition, Councillor Lyndon Jones, I know Lyndon's online there, will be looking at, with his committee, scrutiny committee in September, at an update on the recommendations from the PDC report from the year before. So there's progress that is going to be reported on again there. So that's really, I think, a good place to start. As we look to Helen and Kelly. Now, I don't know who's going to take this on. Agenda item number 4, right schools in the right places.
If I could just introduce the report, Chair, and thank the officers for the work that's gone into preparing this. And I think Helen and then Kelly will take us through the report, and if we can have an initial discussion thereafter. What I want to emphasize is, what we're looking at is a horizon scanning exercise in a way, looking at where we want to be and where we want to go in the next 10 years. It's no, it's not an immediate plan to change our school structure, but it's looking at the kind of issues that we need to consider, what we need to be aware of as a cabinet moving forward, and the kind of principles or rather the principles that need to be informing our discussions as an education cabinet member and as cabinet decisions in the next 10 years. We've got our priorities for sustainable schools for learning. We've got other priorities that are for the short to medium term, and I think here now we're looking medium to long term, where we want to go and what are the different demographic pressures, the financial pressures and other issues that will need to be considered. So that's my preamble, and then if we can move over to the officers, and then we can come back perhaps for a discussion afterwards, Jeff.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. And over to Helen.
Yeah, thank you. Not to repeat what the cabinet member has said, Chair. I think Kelly will take you through the detail really of some of the drivers, the enablers and some of the constraints we face really in setting out a course of action in terms of what the school estate will look like in the next 10 years. I guess what's important in all of this and for the committee to consider is how we make our methods transparent and fair to all schools and indeed the public, so people realise how we go about our business, how we come to the conclusions and what are the parameters really for choosing where we build new schools and how we improve the stock that we've already got. So Kelly will give you a bit of detail really to give you the baseline for where we are now, and then we can discuss how we want to take this forward in terms of planning and policy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Helen. And over to Kelly.
Hi, thanks. Hopefully, you've all had sight of the report, but I thought if I just sort of go through a couple of highlight areas for you. So under section 1, I was just sort of reminding us what we were looking at really. We've got 3 sessions programmed through this municipal year to look at this topic area, which is having the right schools in the right places. So this is obviously my sort of scene setting session for that. So under section 2, I'm quoting the number of schools that we've got, 93 schools. So we've got 77 primary, 14 secondary and 2 special schools. And from them, we have 10 Welsh medium primary, 2 Welsh medium secondary, and we've got 5 faith primary and 1 faith secondary school. So we've got a nice split there. Under section 2.2, I'm noting the numbers on roll. I've put that in there just mainly to note that there is a fall in roll within Swansea. So if you look at the total for each of the year groups, for example, in year 6 at the moment, we've got 2,869 pupils on roll, and in nursery, we've got 2,309. So there's, a drop of around 500 pupils in that period per year group. And obviously that will have an impact as time goes on. We are getting quite a lot of inward migration at the moment with the university and dependence from the hospital, as well as, we've welcomed a lot of refugees and asylum seekers in Swansea as well, but in general, the role is declining. So under section 2.3, I was looking at the fact that each school has a calculation undertaken each year to assess the capacity to accommodate learners. So this will generate an admission number for the school, and each school has to admit up to that admission number in each year group. What that does mean is that parental preference can be achieved up to that admission number. So when we talk about things like catchment areas, if there are surplus places in schools, the sort of catchment areas are relevant then, because the parental choice sort of trumps it really up to that admission number. Obviously, where we do have surplus places, there is a cost associated with maintaining those places for the school, mainly because the school is funded on numbers of pupils on roll. When we look at the condition of buildings under section 2.4, each school has a condition survey, and it will identify them as a category, sort of ranging from categories A to category D. You'll be aware of the QD sort of programme and Sustainable Communities for Learning. So we have, through that programme and our capital programme, looked to remove category D schools. And we're also looking at category C being addressed then through those programmes going forward. So just because a school might be of sound condition as well, there can still be issues around the suitability to deliver the curriculum, or to be able to accommodate staff and learners with additional needs. So there are, issues even with some of our better quality schools that need to be addressed. Under section 2.5, I put in something there about the display energy certificate that each school has to have every year. The display energy certificate looks at how the users use the building. It's not necessarily about the building itself. And what it'll do is have a sort of a report each time, and it'll give some recommendations for improving the energy performance of the building. So we've got rankings for this down from A to G, and the bulk of our schools tend to be in the sort of C to E categories there. Obviously, with the energy efficiency, there's a link to the spend of the school on utilities as well. So it's important to look at that. Under section 2.6, we were looking at home to school transport, which is provided in accordance with our home school transport policy. So if a family lives more than 2 miles from their primary school or more than 3 miles from the catchment secondary school, we provide transport. We will do it in shorter periods if there's no available walking route. Home to school transport is a real issue for us at the moment in the council. We're projecting our budget's going to overspend by around £3 million already for this year. So it is really something that we need to be addressing. And a lot of that is to do with changes in contract prices linked to fuel, and the fact that we don't have a large number of providers in the area. The issue with that, of course, is that because we've got one education budget, the overspends then do have to be found from elsewhere and other services that are directly for the education of learners on roll. So then section 3, we were looking at why we need to change. I've mentioned the birth rate falling. And that covers in section 3.2. Under 3.3, the WESP, Cabinet has approved and Council has approved the WESP for Swansea, the Welsh Education Strategic Plan. So we do require additional places to be provided within the Welsh language. So that will have to be addressed, and that's within the next 10-year period as well. So under 3.4, the condition of some of our buildings does lead to schools spending a lot of their delegated budget share on repairs and maintenance. And obviously every penny spent on that is money that's not spent on the direct education of learners on roll. And I mentioned the utility costs and the energy efficiency as well. And obviously we need to look at the council's carbon footprint. 3.5, talking about suitability again and ability to accommodate learners with additional learning needs. So we're also encouraging schools to work with the Welsh Government's Community Focused Schools initiative, and that's about trying to engage more with the community, get the community into the school where we can, you know, getting those families and the wider community sort of feeling as one with the school, really. I've mentioned under 3.6 the continual increase in school transport costs, and that is unsustainable. Under 3.7, as the school revenue budgets get tighter, every sort of school in the stock really could lead to economies of scale, looking at the, sort of we can get our stock at a better quality and standard there. So 3.8, the local development plan. We have got a large number of sites within Swansea with major developments planned. That could lead to a change in the learner population across Swansea. It could move. We could have new patterns of demand within our schools. Of course, the problem we have with that is that the local development plan build out is within the hands of the developers. So we do have to sort of work really closely with them really on when the different stages of the housing estates are going to be progressed. So as a section then, under 4, and sustainable communities for learning. So this is our new programme that's match funded by the Welsh Government. There are different intervention rates for different projects within that programme. We have successfully delivered under Band A and Band B that you might have heard about under the previous name of this programme, the 21st Century Schools. We're now in the process of having to submit a new bid for funding, and that's going to cover again a 9-year period. So sort of fits in with what we're thinking about of the plan for the next sort of 10 years. So we'll have to submit that bid by the 31st of March 2024, and it'll be broken down into sort of waves, 3-year waves. So the first wave of that is going to mop up really the remnants of Band B, we think, and perhaps 1 or 2 other small projects. And we're working now on what we can put in then to the second and third waves, and what sort of building stock we can sort of look at putting in through there, linked of course to our pupil populations. So we will be going to Cabinet in December 23 with our draft of that strategic outline programme, and hoping we can get that approved. So under section 5 then, formulating a 10-year plan. This is what I'm hoping we can consider today, is that if we can look at a 10-year school organisation plan, it can encompass then the sustainable communities for learning. WESP will be linked with it as well, and we can include things like demographic details. I've suggested some things there under section 5.1, so we can look at actual pupil roles where there's a shortage or a surplus of capacity places. We can look at ALN provision and places, so this can link in with work that you'll be hearing about in the next session on our SDF review, for example. We can look at sixth form provision and vocational provision across the county. We mentioned WESP. We can look at the ages of school buildings, decks, all the stats that we've got there on school buildings and condition. And we can also look at pupil turnover percentage for each school, which can be an issue, particularly for those close to the university and hospital. I'm suggesting that we can look at a statement of assumptions, what we would want as a maximum size of a school, for example, some details on historical school reorganisation to see how far we have actually come, in this programme, and obviously linking to other policies that link to school organisation. I've mentioned home to school transport, for example. Looking at our diversity of provision across the council and accessibility to schools, notes on parental preference and energy sufficiency. So what I was hoping is that if we can agree to start looking at that plan, possibly for the next session, we can come with a sort of a draft to look at, and then we can consider whether we want to engage either before or after that with stakeholders, and whether we want to have any workshops. I think that was something we mentioned in our last session, potentially to help to develop that plan. So that's about it from me in a nutshell for the report. I don't know if anybody, Helen or Councillor Smith, want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, Councillor Smith will come in afterwards. Helen, do you want to add anything to Kelly's excellent report?
No, I think that's really clear, really. I know I'm not adding anything, but I think it sets the tone, really, of where we need to get to. And for me, as I said earlier, it's about that transparency of having a plan that's available to all stakeholders to know how we've come to our decision making, and the rationale really behind the changes that are required, as Kelly has pointed to.
Lovely, thank you, Helen. I can't see anyone indicating at the moment. So as you put in your hands up, I make one or two initial comments. Openness and transparency. I think I've heard that a number of times already. The importance of really looking at the current position and taking a carefully planned approach to this ambitious 10-year plan, engaging the key partners and making sure that we scan this horizon very carefully. I like that way of thinking about it. And for me, this is such a massive area that affects so many. I mean, 36,000 children and so many families across Swansea. It's great to hear the spirit of this approach being very, very carefully thought through very early on. So that puts a smile on my face, certainly, because the challenges will be very significant. Councillor Lyndon Jones has his hand up.
We are. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Kelly, for that report. Really, really good and detailed as always from you. So thanks for that. Can you tell me, number one, when was a review last done of where the numbers are in schools and, altering the school, if you like, the boundaries of where pupils go to that particular school? The first bit. And the second bit, obviously I probably should declare an interest. I'm going to mention something about Bishopston Comprehensive, because obviously that hasn't got sixth form provision, and as a result, people, when they leave there from Gower, Pennard, Bishopston, are bussed all around Swansea, to other sixth forms, and even from an environmental reasons, and we talk about a climate emergency, and that's probably, and cost, which you've mentioned, that's probably not a great way to go. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. Yeah, so the last time we undertook a sort of a large-scale catchment area review was for September 21. You recall we've relocated Hanalan and Tudina Welsh Medium Primary Schools. So what we did as part of that then was change the catchment areas for a number of the Welsh Medium Primary Schools, so that they more appropriately reflected the areas where the pupils were coming from then for those schools. Prior to that, we haven't really considered any wide-scale catchment area reviews. Something I mentioned earlier with parental preference on the admission numbers in schools. If there are spaces, parents can apply for those places. So it's sort of is a little bit of a red herring then in some cases, because just because if you change a catchment area, parents will still go where they want to go. The only difference for us is that we may or may not have to provide homeschool transport for that place then. So I hope that sort of answers that question for you. With regard to sixth forms, 7 of our 14 schools have got sixth forms. They are funded differently from the remainder of the schools from the pre-16 population. So the Welsh Government fund those and sixth forms and colleges from a separate pot of funding. So we can't actually even create new vocational subjects in our sixth forms without the approval of the Welsh Government, because what they're obviously looking to do is have best value across the whole of Wales, really. So it's not really within our gift to create a sixth form ourselves. We would have to look at consulting with the Welsh Government in the first instance for that, and obviously we would like to look at best value.
Yeah, great point. Thanks. It's something that clearly they need to consider, though, because obviously, busing people all around Swansea. We've had a motion to council saying about a climate emergency and everything else, and we are slapping it in the face by busing children all around Swansea. So on the one hand, we're saying we want a climate emergency, and the second thing is, we're doing that. So I think it's not something you can do today or tomorrow, and I appreciate that. But I think for a number of schools, the catchment area is an issue, and that sixth form provision is clearly an issue. But it's not a new thing. It's been obviously on the agenda, I'm sure, for a long time. But it's something that I think we should consider and get Welsh Government to consider as well, but I thank you for your report, really detailed as always from you, and some really good points in there, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. And I'll make some notes for that, for the plan potentially that we can cover sixth form and catchment review and what that means potentially in the plan, isn't it?
But thank you very much, and because and Helen, because that report didn't take 2 minutes to put together.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thanks for the answer there, Kelly. I just wonder, I'll mention it at this early stage before I call Councillor Smith in, whether the committee thinks that a session, a workshop on home to school transport might be worthwhile on its own. This is something I don't feel as clued up about as perhaps I should be. When my children went to school, we lived across the road from it, and when they walked to comp, they walked a mile to school every morning, or a mile and a half, whatever it was. My grandchildren go to school, they live quite nearby as well, so we have no direct experience. We'd like to unpick this and really understand what the issues are. My policy has always been to send his kids to the school nearest to your house, and trust the school and yourself to get on with the education challenge, working together. So I've looked at the home to school transport policy, which is helpful, but maybe a workshop, just a question mark for you to think about. Councillor Smith.
I would endorse that, because obviously there's the home to school transport policy, there's the legislation to which we are required to work. But I think behind this, there's a lot of context that needs to be understood, and there's a lot of ongoing work elsewhere, Welsh Government and so on, that may have a bearing on, may or may not have a bearing on what we want to do. And so, that's not something that isn't static, and we need to be aware of that. And I'm having spoken to her and discussed this at length with her, I'm convinced that Kelly will produce an outstanding briefing to any workshop. I'm having enjoyed the benefit of her expertise on this. I think more broadly, Chair, I think what we need to look at when we're looking at the school estate, yes, the economics of this, the cost of provision has to come into it. We no authority wants to carry a load of surplus places, a high number of surplus places across the school estate. Although let's not overestimate how much that is costing. I remember one commentator said, well, if there's 100 surplus places, that must be costing you £500,000. And I worked out, well, how do you work that out? Well, he multiplied £5,000 cost per pupil, multiplied by the number of surplus places, and that was where he got his £500,000 from. Well, I thought, hang on, it doesn't quite work that way. What we need to look at, though, is what is the optimum figure that we're looking for? It's going to be, we're never going to reach the optimum figure, but what is the reasonable what's the word I'm looking for? Range that we're looking for. that allows us to have a reasonable cost in terms of maintenance cost per pupil, and also allows us to offer a wide curriculum, allows us to have sufficient expertise within middle leadership, not just senior leadership, but allows you to build that middle leadership team within a school, how we configure our schools, how we use the school estates, are there joint usage, and community schools. We know we want community focused schools, but what does that mean in practice, and how we use our buildings more effectively, and share the resources where possible. I think all of those issues are things that the committee or its workshops need to look at. Is federation an issue that we should look at? I know that's been looked at and implemented in other councils. That's something again which we need to look at with an open mind here in Swansea. It's not going to be a panacea for all our problems. Let's recognise that, but where appropriate, I think it's something we need to look at. And also, again, how do we link what we are doing in terms of planning school provision with a national target in terms of 1 million Welsh speakers, and how the two, as Kelly said, how the two agendas need to dovetail. So I think there's a lot of meat on the bones of what this committee needs to do moving forward, Jen. I think it's going to be an interesting piece of work.
Absolutely agree with that. Thank you very much, Robert, for those insights. Well, when I read this report, a comment that was made to me over 20 years ago in Birch Grove Senior Citizens Pavilions came to mind, right? And this lady years ago, I was there with Councillor Paul Lloyd, and a lady said to me, what you've got to remember, Mike, is that Swansea gets further away the older I get, and that the villages have gone. And I didn't know what she meant. And what she said, urban sprawl over time has completely transformed her communities, the 5 villages of Birch Grove, or Bonny Mine it was, as were, into a very different place. So our school estate was created in a different era. The Victorian needs were being addressed at that time. So the insights from Councillor Smith there really nudge us in the right direction.
That's right. And, and Lyndon will probably remember it, the old Penarreol Primary School, where that was located at the bottom of Frampton Road, which was quite away from any of the houses. And then, of course, when they took account of where the houses are actually being built, that school had to be relocated. So there are things there, that kind of issue that we need to bear in mind and take account of, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. I can't see anyone indicating. Councillor Joy, Sandra.
Can I just ask for a little bit of clarity on timescales, please? This is quite a high-level report, and it's the start of something very big. I'm very aware of that. But where, in a sense, where is the report going? In that, where it goes from quite a high-level report to being quite specific about, category C schools, what you're doing with them, catchment areas, all of that kind of stuff, home school transport, costs are involved in that. At what point are we going to be getting down to that sort of level of nitty gritty, for want of a better phrase?
Thank you, Sandra.
Do you want me to come in?
Yes, please, Kel.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, with the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, that's going to have to go to Cabinet in December 23. So if we are dovetailing a few things together, we are going to have to align with, with that a little. We've already got the WESP in place, so we've already committed to that. So again, that's another thing to align to. And obviously, we've committed through this municipal year that we'll have 3 sessions. I've only got 2 sessions left, really, in a roundup. So for the particular plan that we're talking about, which I think is going to be more the setting out our stall, really, isn't it, of what we think is how we would like to see our school estate in Swansea. Then that's going to be by the end of this municipal year. But obviously, things like the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, once that is submitted, there'll be an opportunity to refresh every 3 years. So that's a bit of more of a living and breathing sort of document, really, that will affect things like school condition at a point in time. I don't know if that answers your question.
But I think what's important to understand is, we're not looking at this piece of work determining the strategic outline programme that goes in, that'll be before cabinet in December. I think that's the immediate priority. What we're looking at here is more for the medium to long term.
Is that okay, Councillor Joy? So Kelly, can I just ask, we're looking at this going in, and we're looking at over this 10-year period, we're looking at 3 waves. So there's sort of 3 distinct tranches of plans then, all part of one plan, but 3 distinct waves over the period. Is that what that means?
For the Sustainable Communities for Learning, so that's the bid to the Welsh Government for the matched capital funding. So that will be in 3 distinct waves, and every 3 years then the waves get renewed. So wave 2 will then become wave 1 then, of another 9-year programme.
I mean, I don't know who makes this up, because we used to have bands, now we've got waves. I mean, before long we'll have very high frequency, mind, you don't appreciate that. So I think, where that's the world in which we're working, unfortunately.
The colours have gone, though, haven't they? Right, I can't see anyone indicated here. Another question from me. In Kate's report last time, she mentioned 34 specialist teaching facilities in various locations. Excuse me. Is one consideration going to be the importance and relevance of current STF provision balanced with the existing special school provision to ensure the needs of our children are met in that context? Will this be part of the process?
Well, I think the STF review is the current STF review is the STF review, and I think we need to allow that to be a distinct piece of work. But again, it goes back to the same question. Needs change over time, and one of the reasons we're having the STF review now is that our children and young people's needs have changed over time. They will continue to evolve, and it's a matter of making sure that we've got the process in place to be able to capture that and ensure that we haven't got a stagnant provision, but that we've got provision that meets the needs of all children and young people in Swansea.
That's lovely. Thank you, Robert. Helen?
Yeah, both transformational goals really will talk to each other. So one can't exist without recognising the other. So obviously Kelly has described a large programme of change for the next 10 years. The work in ALN, specifically on specialist teaching facilities, will encompass the next 5 years, if not sooner. So it's a medium-term transformational change, but we hope to scale up some of the pilot work we've done already as soon as we can, really, so that we strengthen the clusters of ALN provision. So the whole aim of that programme of change is to get stronger clusters, providing universal support to additional learning needs. But as part of that seeking sufficient specialist places in Swansea, we have to look at it as a pipeline. So we already know that some of our children in specialist teaching facilities, for example, would benefit from being in a special school. So creating more special school places will allow those children to move through that pipeline to the right provision, and indeed then release more places at the start of the pipeline, if that makes sense. But inevitably, these 2 programmes can't exist without talking to each other.
Excellent. Thank you both for that helpful explanation. I can see Councillor Sam is in the room now online. Hello, Sam. Nice to see you. The learner patterns and demands changing, referred to with the LDP at 3.8. How do we predict and project the demographics, right, over the period, and how the impact will be felt by existing school provision? So if we have some of the large schemes coming online in the next period, in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years, then that's going to be a key consideration. The impact on existing schools, and maybe the creation of new schools to meet those large new estates when they come along. So do we feel confident that we've got the data to make those kind of predictions linked to the LDP?
I think we've got the data. I think that this will be something for the committee to look at on how we make sure that the new developments, we make the most of those opportunities, we cater for children living in the new developments, and that those are dovetailed and complement the needs of existing communities across Swansea. So it's again, it's taking a step back and looking at, well, how do we renew the estate in a way that ensures that all communities, new and future communities, existing and future communities, are going to be have their needs met.
Excellent, that's helpful. Helen?
Yes, in terms of the LDP, we have to acknowledge as well there are some risks. So new houses don't necessarily mean new children. So that's one consideration. Obviously, there are proxy indicators that we can use to look at, you know, that roughly speaking, given the age of the intended population, the type of build, we can guess and estimate the numbers of children who may come through. But obviously as well, the deliverability in terms of construction. So in terms of the funding available, the funding is triggered by the number of houses built. So if those houses are delayed, then there's inevitably a delay in funding. So it can cause a risk really to future plans. So we have to be very careful really that we consider all those risks and issues.
Thank you, Helen. So for me, I can't see anyone indicating now. For me, this takes me back to the direct experience that I've had in previous with my children. And oh, there we are. I'll call you in now, Yvonne, in a sec. And one of the things that we saw in Cumbulla Primary School and Mansleton Primary Schools years ago were crumbling buildings, literally crumbling buildings. And I remember the sensitivities that we all felt when a new school was planned, especially for Cumbulla Park, because we all loved Cumbulla Park. Burlice was built. It's been a resounding and fantastic success, and plaster doesn't fall off the roof, you know. So I want to assure anybody that listens to this committee meeting, engages with our work in any kind of way, that the process is sensitive, but we will step carefully. And what I'm hearing here is a very thoroughgoing process to engage everybody and answer any questions that we might have as we go forward now. So can I call in, who am I seeing now? I can see Kelly.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add on to something that Helen had said there. So obviously we do pupil projections and we check out pupil projections for accuracy. We've also got the supplementary planning guidance that gives an indication of, as Helen mentioned, the type of housing and how many pupils of whatever age we're likely to get through, and whether they're Welsh medium, English medium. What we can't tell though is where those families are going to come from. So they could be inward migration into Swansea, or they could be from other areas of Swansea. And I think that's the trick then, isn't it? Is as they move in, then it's sort of seeing the knock-on effect potentially elsewhere across Swansea as and when they develop, because what we find is it's sometimes a bit of a slow burner. So when you do have that new build school, you'll have a lot of pupils from the local area going there, but the families who've moved into that LDP site, the children might only have a couple of years left in their primary school, for example, and they just leave them with their friends and transport them until they're ready to move on to comp. So it's just trying to keep an eye on really the stats and doing the best we can with projections and retrospective analysis.
And I think we have to recognise that these are plans; they are not delivered yet. These are not projections. Representing the ward I do, I remember the plan for Pontypridd Secondary School. We're still waiting for Pontypridd Secondary School because the houses were built, but the school went somewhere else. So I think, you know, that's something we need to bear in mind as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. Councillor Jardine.
Sorry, Chair. I was just saying that Kelly had her hand up. You said no one else was. So I didn't have a question. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you, Yvonne. It's the way the screen is set. When it's set in this way, I can't really pick up the yellow very well. You know, if you see all the paper, people listed on the right pane, you can see the hands up easier. But anyway, thank you very much. So do we have any other comments from committee members? Any other comments or questions? No, we seem to be content. I'd add my voice to what everybody said, Kelly. This is really a very good, helpful, detailed report, which gives us a springboard into the sessions to come. Please, officers, don't think that I'm going to suggest a workshop every time we have one of these meetings. I'm really not, right? This one was a big one in my mind before the committee. When I read the report, I thought, no, but this if colleagues feel as in the dark about some of these technical matters as I do, the workshop will be helpful here. But we are conscious of not overburdening you. Please be assured about that. So if we go back to the agenda, we're up to agenda item number 5. And when we look at the agenda on the back of the papers here, we've got our work plan. And just to remind everyone, we're taking an alternate perspective. So we start off with right schools and right places, then transform and additional learning needs. And that's the way that the meetings will progress throughout the year. And then we'll aim, by the time we get to April, to have an end of year report. I think that is robust. Okay, so the last thing is for us to confirm the meeting. The next meeting to be held on Wednesday, the 27th of September at 4 p.m. And there's one final point, actually. I just saw the note here that I'd left myself and then overlooked it. In the report here, we talk about changing needs of children. Very important for us to focus on socio-economic needs, the WIMD, children in the most deprived 10% of wards, etc. And to consider how we dovetail with programmes like Flying Start, for example, and to avoid some of those nuances that we've seen in the past with some of these schemes where kids on one side of the street are included, but kids on the other side of the street are not. And that was raised by me by a few colleagues quite recently in a number of different contexts. In this process of change, we want to cast the net as far as we can to make sure the needs are met. Okay, everyone. Well, on that point, I will thank you all very much indeed for your attendance and your commitment and bring the meeting to a close. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.